Vinland Saga's second season starts this month, so I thought I'd catch up on the first one and see what all the fuss is about. And I'm so glad I did that. There aren't many things I'm more hyped for right now than the next season. That's because this first one was just a prologue, but don't worry, it's not a dragged out, boring adaptation of the first few chapters. This so-called prologue is a proper story arc, if not a proper story, and it actually spans almost 1/3 of the current manga, which has been running for 16 years. It's a prologue in the same way that the chapters before that one event in Berserk are kind of a prologue. It's a saga and you get so much backstory on all the characters. It sets them up so nicely that no matter what they do going forward, no matter how dialogue heavy and low action it is, it's always gonna be exciting. That's how it's a prologue. This video is going to be a character analysis more than anything else, though I'll still try and merge it with the actual plot discussions where I can. I will spoil almost everything, so make sure to watch the series first, it's amazing. And do make sure to come back afterwards, as it's quite easy to miss a lot of what the show's trying to convey. Anyway, make sure to subscribe and ring the bell to never miss my upload, share my videos with your friends and give them a like, it helps and motivates me a ton. And let's get started. Final disclaimer, you should know that I haven't read the manga. Our first character is Thors. He's the absolute badass warrior that can beat the crap out of anyone with his bare hands, or that's what the audience and his son see him for anyway, before it's already too late and he dies. But as the season nears its end and the themes and discussions of what a true warrior is come up more and more, us and Thorfinn start to realize just how important he was to the whole picture. He wasn't simply written off too early, and he wasn't just a reason for Thorfinn to become an interesting character either, but also an example, a literal personification of the series' idea of a true warrior. A true warrior doesn't need a weapon, not because that's badass, well, okay, maybe a little bit, but because a true warrior doesn't want to fight. He is instead the one who understands that peace gives infinitely more fulfillment to a person than winning any amount of battles. A true warrior can fight, but only to protect those he loves, yet still not take any lives in the process. A true warrior has responsibilities. Thorfinn is Thors' son and arguably our main character for the first couple of episodes, before he pretty much turns into just one of the various main characters, if not a more minor one according to some. After all, we don't see that much of his growth from the little angry kid to the big angry kid that is also adept with knives and completely desensitized to death. Still, the beginning of the show kind of acts like a backstory for him more than anything else. I love the frankly sad concept of his travels, having to live with the man that killed his father, and without any pride, might I add. It's no surprise he turned into such a cold scumbag. He's still a character I'm very glad we had in the first season, though mostly when it comes to how other characters interact with him. How our Canute, Thorkell, Askeladd, Bjorn and so on react to getting treated terribly by this complete asshole. He is a little one-dimensional at times, and often because he actually doesn't have that many sides in fact, and not because we haven't seen them all. Although it still adds to the character in a way. Literally everything that is going on in his mind and pretty much his whole personality is, I need to kill Askeladd. He doesn't even think about or realize that once he finally does so, there isn't going to be peace. There's going to be emptiness. Everything that drives him forward will be gone. He'll realize that he spent more time chasing after something his father wouldn't have even wanted him to than he actually did being with his father in the first place. Luckily, he doesn't get to do it in the end. Well, he can do it and he could have done it much the same many times before, but it's not the way he imagined it. It was a very obvious conclusion, but still a genius one. But back to his one-dimensionness. This is a prologue after all, so we'll get to see him develop more soon enough, I'm sure of it. Then we have Canute, who's one of the most interesting for me. The whole discussion about love and what it means ultimately comes back to him, so I'll speak about it here. Before getting into it though, you should know that the show doesn't use the word love in the way we understand it today, but rather in a very broad and spiritual one. Basically, love when it comes to the obligations you have to your fellow man and also the whole world around you, every animal, every tree and so on. But anyway, this is how it goes. The priest suddenly finds himself with a lot of free time to think, not many Christians to talk to, and a ton of alcohol. And what does that cause? Well, a conversion to Buddhism. Of course. From what I understand, Buddhism stands for these two ideas among others. First, indifference when it comes to saving someone, which is very similar to the philosophy of utilitarianism. Basically, you should prioritize saving 3 children you don't know instead of your own son and daughter, because that will maximize happiness for the most people. Much the same way that Ragnar should have prioritized stepping up for the lives of the whole village over his king's safety. He didn't, and it's why the priest states he didn't have love. However, when you think about it, the prince might actually be more detrimental to the world when it comes to the whole picture, and thus actually save not just 100 but hundreds of thousands of lives. But we still get what the priest means. Ragnar probably would have done the same thing if it was his son or something. Secondly, Buddhism also stands for the idea that death is love. Is something that I heard somewhere out of Vinland Saga yet couldn't find a source for, so you know what, scratch that. Anyway, Canute agrees that hitherto his understanding of love is not indifference, and thus his using of love in order to justify prioritizing your friends and relatives is bad, and can ultimately cause an inordinate amount of death and suffering, even at the hands of truly kind and just people such as Ragnar. And most importantly, that it was instilled within him by Christianity and the very God he believed in. He realized that God cursed men by making most of them unable to grasp what true love is, and that he will not save those on earth, so they might as well create their own paradise. I love how he doesn't actually stop believing in God's existence, but rather in God's kindness. He accepts the idea that God might exist, and thus his actions might also grant him an afterlife-long trip to hell, yet he still goes against God. It shows how disappointed Canute is in him, and most importantly, just how determined he is to creating this paradise, even if it costs him eternal suffering. Afterwards, Canute's character goes on to embody another idea, once again that of the true warrior. He really hammers it in, and in such a great way too. The fact that the true warrior has absolutely nothing to do with physical strength and fighting prowess. He becomes one, yet Thorfinn and even Thorkell don't. Yet, anyway. Overall, Canute's turned from the weakest person in the show to one of the most badass, to be honest. I'm still on that high where I get excited each time he speaks or does pretty much anything, and I'm not sure if it will ever fade. But Thorkell is the single most badass one and also the most hilarious. He is absolutely ripped, yet somehow 10 times stronger than any strongman in the 21st century. He is also a great personification of the simple-minded people back in the day that could enjoy war for the sake of war, whilst genuinely not being able to understand why anyone doesn't. For him, killing a man is like sitting down for a nice meal and a beer. You can't possibly hate the character since he's literally an overgrown child. I'm really looking forward to him maturing a little bit under Canute's influence, actually seeing the real repercussions of war, whether it be by all his men dying or even a loved one that hasn't been introduced yet, and because on that, having a change of heart, at least a little bit. Another surprisingly charismatic character was Bjorn. He is the original Thorkell, but once we get to know him a little, not even much, we start to realize that he's probably the most rational one among Askeladd's men. He actually needs to eat these rage-inducing mushrooms or whatever they are, since he doesn't seem like the type to really enjoy aggression, at least not as much as all the others. This is further proven when Askeladd explains that he hates all the disgusting and simple Vikings, yet he doesn't hate Bjorn, since he's the only one that isn't like that. Next is Askeladd himself, who's one of the most mysterious and complex characters we have. Some might say that he is, while not our main character, probably our protagonist. He makes the big decisions, his actions drive the story forward, and we're often in on his plans. He isn't even evil when you think about it. He's the average Viking trying to do anything he can to earn money. Floki is the real villain here. Askeladd just got the contract. Also, we're only angry because it's Thors dying, and that goes against the idea of love the show goes on to establish, which might even be one of the reasons for our hatred to Askeladd fading as we start to grasp that idea. Besides, he also leaves Thors' men and Thorfinn unharmed, since he has no reason to hurt them. Askeladd lives by the philosophy of consequentialism. For him, the ends justify the means, which is why he also kills Ragnar. After all, what is one life compared to the thousands he could possibly save by shaping Canute into a proper king that is confident, yet also avoids war at all costs due to his compassionate nature. And in the alternate universe where he didn't do that, Canute's father, King Sweyn, would have went on to wage more war. Moreover, this fits the philosophy of love once again. So what if it's Ragnar? He is still but one life compared to millions. Him killing Bjorn, on the other hand, is obvious and not much for debate. He was gonna die no matter what, and this was the only way for him to go to Valhalla, by dying in battle. And finally, why did he kill the king? He killed the king because the king left him no other choice. One was to save Canute and the other was to save Wales. So, in the heat of the moment, Askeladd decides to both let his frustration for the king out and also fully complete his quest. He will save Wales, save Canute, and make him king on top of that. The only thing he has to give up is his life. This final act of his is what truly paints him as a hero and not a villain. He pleads insane so Canute doesn't get blamed, and even lets Canute kill him to make him shine in everyone's eyes. He might as well do that. Finally, a minor character, the priest. He was very great. I could honestly listen to him and the Vikings talk for hours. It's so eye-opening how little they actually think about stuff and simply go with the flow, and seeing how some were actually willing to engage with him was oddly wholesome. For me, all of these characters, along with the fact that the show is actually good, are what sets the great expectations for season 2, and it's also why I think it does work like a prologue. So many different character interactions and possibilities have been planted in my head by my own imagination that I can almost create my own storyline in there. Thorfinn meeting his family, Canute meeting his brother, and so on. The characters are completely morally grey as well. There aren't really any evil or good guys, just people with different values and motives. The most surprising thing, however, was the character development. Askeladd, Thorfinn, Canute, hell, even minor ones such as the priest or Bjorn, they all changed so much throughout the show that watching the earlier scenes like Thor's death becomes almost surreal in a way. It's like a weird alternative universe. Finally, a little about animation and audio. Some might like Vinland Saga's animation a ton because of its simple nature. I generally like it too, though there are a lot of times where the CGI crowds look off. It's understandable if we're just looking over Askeladd's band for 3 seconds or something like that, but when we have him surrounded by all his men that want to kill him in a serious scenario and they all look like this, it's kind of immersion breaking. The soundtrack sadly doesn't stand out with anything, though I'll admit that the first opening has become one of my favorites ever. The voice acting is good too, though Thorkell was way above the others in my opinion. Although I really hate the fact that the characters speak in different languages, which is at times important to the plot, yet the anime is fully in Japanese. This is fine, but the subtitles don't indicate it either, and that's extremely confusing for a non-Japanese speaker. From what I understand, the Vikings speak casual Japanese while the Englishmen sound more sophisticated. I'm not that much of a weeb yet to pick up on that stuff though. I am glad they don't speak English, however, that would have been horrendous. It isn't that often though, so I guess it's okay. Overall, this first season of Vinland Saga is amazing, and you should definitely catch up on it before the second one starts, which might have even happened by the time I upload this. The biggest criticism I have is that the plot gets a little weaker in the middle compared to the start and the end of it. And I'll give Vinland Saga Season 1 a very low 9 out of 10. About the series going forward, it might take things a little bit slower as Thorfinn tries to possibly live out the rest of his life similar to his dad. That doesn't mean it's gonna be bad though. Like I said, the characters have gone through so much development that no matter what they do, it will always be exciting. And you should keep in mind that just like how a real warrior doesn't have to fight, a real story doesn't have to have fights or something. Sorry. And that was it for my Vinland Saga Season 1 review. Ring the bell, share, like, comment and all that good stuff. Make sure to check out my rating list if you're interested. I keep all my video ideas and what I'm currently working on there. It's linked on my YouTube. As always, subscribe if you like this type of content and want to see more of it. Thanks for sticking around, and I'll see you in the next video.